Great presentations, great Q&A. Thank you very much indeed. You just need to click the leave button, and I'll just carry on and introduce the next speaker. Thanks, Ken. So we're coming to the highlight of the day. We've heard an awful lot from all sorts of people. Some of it might be confusing, some of it might be conflicting, some of it's violent agreement. To try to make sense of it all, I'm delighted to introduce our regular summariser from Larch Consulting and a force at the heart of Great FM for many years, bringing us the whole day in a fun-filled flurry of insight, intelligence, and ingenuity. It's Lucy Jeynes. I hope. She'll be arriving any minute now. She's climbing up the stairs. She's adjusting her hair. There she is.
I can only disappoint, can't I, after an introduction like that? It's all downhill from here. What a brilliant day. It's been really interesting. I've found the time, I mean, I'm the person that has to listen to every single presentation, and the time has absolutely flown by. It's been really fascinating. That question that came up in one of the sessions, that statement, we have a once in a lifetime opportunity to reinvent the workplace. That statement from Boston Consulting. So is FM going to step up or stuff it up? That's the big question, isn't it? So what I'm going to do is I'm going to try and gallop you through a summary of everything that everybody has said today, and see if we can make any sense of that, and then see what we think we need to do as a kind of call to action going forward. Certainly, I think coming out of this big themes, we need to claim leadership of the workplace experience. And we're already risking our role there because everyone else is muscling into that. Everybody in the C-suite thinks they're a workplace experience expert now. Lots of people getting in on our act. We need to be able to talk about our contribution in respect of culture, purpose and well-being, as well as our previous focus that we had on safety and compliance and productivity, that people, process and place that we used to work on before. It's a well-known idea, isn't it, that crisis fosters creativity, and we need to make sure that that's something that isn't happening outside of FM while we still plug on, but that actually we are being creative and applying our thinking as well. Because the thing coming out of all of these sessions is that our teams won't come in unless it's better in the workplace than it is being at home, in terms of safety, in terms of support for working, in terms of facilities. So what did we cover in the day? We started off with Martin. We love Martin chairing. And the fact that he said lean into this event and get involved was really sort of testament to the amount of chat happening alongside the conference. And I think that's an enriched experience that I've really enjoyed with these online conferences. And I don't know how that's going to work if we go back to being in person, because it wouldn't be very good form to chat to people while someone else is talking. But that has actually given another dimension to the sessions today, I think. 750, 800 people from 81 different countries. We wouldn't see that happening in a room in London anytime soon. So it's been great to have that perspective, although we haven't heard that much about what's happening overseas. So I think that that will be something that will be interesting to hear at the next Workplace Futures, a bit more of an international experience there. I'm sure at the end we'll be thanking our sponsors again, but I do like to give a shout out to them, partly because we're one of the sponsors, but also because the fact that you've attended this event for free only happens because of all the support from the sponsors. And if you feel like it's been fantastic value and you've been very lucky to come, then as Martin explained, our campaign within the pattern makers to support the Escape Rehab Cafe at DMRC Stamford Hall, the link is in the chat. I'm sure somebody will post that link again. And if you think you've had a good day, then please make a contribution to the charity and see whether you can actually add some value in a very easy way to people that are out on injuries coming from active service. So our theme has been the return to the workplace, but many of us in FM have been there all the time. So what we've really been talking about is the changes to the workplace that are happening as a result of what's been happening with the pandemic, trying to work out what the next normal is going to be, and really what hybrid working is going to mean. This is a conversation that is really beginning rather than ending, and the pandemic is very far from over, so we don't know how many more iterations of all of these other things we're going to go through yet either. So what we really need to think as we're going through this change and disruption is how FM can provide advice, reassurance, information, and how we can work together as a community of professionals. So that really summed up the introduction from Martin. And then we had Tim Oldman starting us off. Doesn't like to shy away from putting his views forward, and that is absolutely great, because that question about, it's the once in a lifetime opportunity. Tim shares a view that actually I hold as well, that we have an opportunity to show our value in FM as workplace experts, and we are in danger of squandering that if we come in late and poorly articulated to this debate and look like FM isn't smart and can't be trusted. Time is not on our side. We need to get moving, because people are going to be coming back to the workplace pretty soon. And 2/3 of organisations do not yet have their strategy in place and articulated. Isn't it interesting that 74% of people think their home office is working well for them, as opposed to 64% of people in the office before the pandemic? What does that say about us as FMs? What does that say about the real estate we're in the workplace? It's not a great story, but there was a direct correlation, wasn't there, in Tim's data, his huge data set, a direct correlation between how good the office is and how much people want to get back to it. So doesn't that tell us that depending on the type of work we're doing and the type of workplace we're in, the success of the return to work is going to be very much based on how good we can make our workplaces and what that means for all the different audiences that we have. We heard next from Hannah Nardini from Workspace, and she was talking about building a return strategy for success. Remote working was more productive than we thought it would be, but people were making the best of it, and the cracks are starting to show now. So the big question we need to answer is, what's the point of going to the office? Why would we need to go back to this workspace as opposed to carry on doing what we're doing? We might go back to socialize, we might go back to collaborate, for a change of routine, a change of scene, for client meetings and a sense of community. And these are thoughts that have woven themselves through all of the other presentations today. What sort of things people are expecting and what they want when they go back. And it sounds like freedom within a framework, giving some kind of guidelines and principles, and then working within that enables us to plan our FM, enables us to plan our catering, enables us to plan how we might run that workspace and still give people individually that opportunity to have their hybrid working. So going up, hybrid working, activity-based working, strategic planning and engagement. Going down, full-time working or full-time remote, open plan desking, and still going down, paper. That's good news, isn't it? Certainly, I think those of us that think we're working from home don't want the kind of filing that we'd be prepared to have at work, because we haven't got the room for it. Next, we heard from Mark Crossley at the HSE, staying on the right side of the law. And of course, we have got legal obligations as employers for people working from home as well as in the workplace. And the guidance that we've had around COVID about ventilation, cleaning, hand hygiene and spacing is remaining the same, we think, apart from spacing, which is going. So actually, of course, what that does mean is that those other three factors are even more important than they were before. There is lots of really good information on the HSE website about not just your COVID obligations, but everything. It's really improved over the years. And so it definitely is worth having a look around and seeing what's available to you. Perhaps a key message that we might be getting through to people, and this came through on the later air quality session as well, is given the requirement for improved ventilation, perhaps an important message to tell people when they're coming back after their summer holidays is your workplace is going to be drafty. Bring a cardigan, thermal comfort is going to be different, because we already know in FM that the most common calls to the help desk are, I'm too hot, I'm too cold. This situation ain't going to solve that anytime soon. And we certainly are going to need some workplace orientation sessions when people come back, because they've forgotten how to do everything. And we've made lots of changes as well. Things like the one-way systems, things like the way we're dealing with touch points and cleaning and that sort of thing, partly to reassure, partly to make sure people are doing things the right way. We then had the team from CIPD. It was really nice to see a professional institute up at the top table helping to deal with this with government. Shame it wasn't one of ours. But there is this new guidance coming out on home and hybrid working. So we're all going to be looking out for that. They're expecting a fairly rapid labour market recovery. And it is important to point out, isn't it? We've talked a lot about home working in this conference, but home working never exceeded 50%. We talked a lot about offices, but there are a lot of people that work in other environments, and that has changed as well, but not in the same ways as offices. The CIPD campaign Flex from First, which would allow everyone to ask for flexible working from day one, including flexi time, compressed hours, annualized hours, job share, term time working only. This is probably the right time to have that sort of campaign, but it makes it even more complicated for us in FM to work out who's going to be in when and what they need and how to support them. So we absolutely do need to up our game. And a third of the workforce at any one point during furlough have been off, and all of these people that are going to move back in, how do we engage those people, our most vital asset? Look out for this task force report, this guidance. I hope at the end of the conference we're going to be able to pull together for you a kind of digest of all of the downloads and documents we've talked about over the day, so that you've got a bit of reading when you go back to your commute, because you won't know what to do with yourself on the train now. So you can read all these articles and guidance, so you don't have to worry about distancing and wearing your mask. We then heard from Craig, the MD of corporate at NG, or Equans as they are now. I think people that have been at NG a long time, they've been through a number of name changes. This is a new one. Do we need to change the conversation around FM? Yes, we talk about people, place and process, but the balance of those things is going to change, isn't it? Craig's referenced Rob Harris's book, The Age of Unreal Estate. We talked about that at the February conference as well. Absolutely worth a read. FM is going to really move from the how to the why. Not how do we look after the buildings, but why do we have them? What are they for? What kind of outcomes are we trying to achieve? So we're looking at things like well-being, social value and sustainability, as well as that pounds, shillings and pence value. Why do organisations want to bring people into a building? What's the benefit of that? The polls aren't showing a focus on the people things. In the polls that we had in this event, when we said, what are we going to be focusing on? We were actually talking about things like compliance and space, and yet all the speakers were talking about people, well-being, work patterns and that sort of thing. So we need to make sure we are actually focusing on the issues where we're going to be perceived to add value, rather than the things that we know how to do. We need to challenge and stretch ourselves. We had Wes Montgomery and from CBRE with Neil Edmund talking about the case study at BT, that enormous portfolio. Some of the numbers that jumped out of that, just to give you an idea of the scale of change, not just the 85% increase in housekeeping staff, but 280,000 new items of signage. Really interesting to get some of these case studies, so that we're not just talking about the theory. We're saying, well, you know, this is how they did it, this is how we did it, this is what we did, this is what you could learn. Really interesting to think about some of those very well structured approaches they took, focusing on destination and location, welcoming people back, actively welcoming them, the use of technology, and then safety, hygiene and well-being. And that would be quite a good summary of the key threads that we've talked about in this conference as well, wouldn't it? We heard from Graham Fox, the head of technical at the Building Engineering Services Association, critical systems for a safe environment. I thought it was fascinating to hear a bit more about that restaurant case study in Guangdong. I saw so many articles on Facebook about that from people that suddenly thought they were experts in air quality in buildings. I don't know about you, but that kind of thing was really annoying me in the first wave of the pandemic. But coming out of that talk, more than just some of those examples, is that overall principle about the importance of indoor air quality, which was already a priority. Guide to good practice being produced there as well, another bit of reading homework. Air change being really important to transmission of the COVID virus and all the other viruses as well. Isn't it interesting, that fact that 80% of our building stock will still be around in 50 years' time, and thinking about all of those buildings we're in that are not purpose-built and don't have purpose designed for air conditioning. How can we get that fresh air in there? That does present a challenge that is going to keep us busy over the next few years, I think, isn't it? We had another Q&A session before lunch. Heard about the pattern makers appeal, which hopefully the link for that is still in the chat. And then just after we'd had our lunch, and I had a pretty quick lunch that I kind of bolted down in the kitchen, and then I saw all those things coming through from the Sodexo team in that reimagining food service, and I felt like I hadn't really applied very much imagination to my tuna salad out the fridge. That was Hannah Hughes and Harpreet Chima from Sodexo talking about how workplaces ought to be having a positive rather than a negative impact on people's well-being, and that the food offering is a really important part of that. But what a challenge for our industry, where 45% of employees have said they are less likely to use their workplace catering on their return to work. We need to be frictionless and hyper convenient. We need to be flexible. We need to give people lots of different channels to get delivery. We really need to transform the food experience in the workplace. And one of the things that is going to be very difficult in doing that is that we're not going to really have a good understanding of footfall and spend and how that's going to change. Because all of these people that say they're going to take a packed lunch from a safety point of view, I mean, I tend to find that's the kind of thing you think you're going to do it, and then after a week you can't be bothered anymore. We don't really know what those patterns are going to be. And so then we're going to have a model that is adjusting over time. And I want to come back to that adjustable model, because this is something I want to mention right at the end of my summing up. We had Raj Krishnamurthy next from Free Space talking about technology and how technology will help to make the workplaces work. If you have some great tech you want to showcase, don't forget that our Technology and FM Awards are open for entries right at the moment. You can find that on the Workplace Futures Conference website link. He's got 4 big questions that we need to be able to answer. From the employee, when will I come in and how will it be? From the FM and workspace teams, how do we deliver a tailored service based on occupancy demand? And what design of mix and space types do we need in this new world? Linked to that is the 4th question from real estate. Do I have the right type and amount of real estate to support this hybrid working? We've looked at how technology can overlay all over that, things like sensors, apps to book you in and that sort of thing. But I think those 4 big questions are questions that we need to carry on thinking about as we handle this transition stage. We had Anne-Marie Aguilar from the Well Building Institute and the certification program. Nice to see that I'm sharing a stage with Robert De Niro. That doesn't happen very often for me. But I don't think it has happened before, actually, to be fair. The second iteration of that Well Building certificate, this is the sort of thing that was perhaps a little bit niche and something that was a focus for facilities managers in the past. But now that people are concerned about returning to work and you've got that stamp of approval physically on the door of your building, your workplace is safe, this could actually transform the uptake of something like that Well Building certification, because this was something that, if I'm honest, I don't think building users were terribly interested in before, and I think they are really interested now. This standard assesses the health of a building across 10 key areas and the impact it has on human health. Look at what the stats are telling us, that employees take less time off sick when they work in healthier buildings. Who'd have thought? People are booking in with their colleagues to come in and collaborate. So are they going to share that information with FM? Because if we can find out who's coming in, it's going to help us to plan, isn't it? So a bit more reading homework for you there, looking at that new building standard. We then heard from the head of workspace, Nicola Gillen at Cushman & Wakefield. What a great question. How new is the new office? We know this stuff isn't new. We know that hybrid working has been talked about for ages. My best friend did her MBA on location independent working about 10 years ago, and she doesn't even work in FM. Some of the reading there, not just the Reba book, The Future Office, which would be a great read, but the Rethinking Design Guide post-COVID, the Cushman & Wakefield report on the future of the workplace, Reimagine, that journal paper. Everyone has got used to the technology, but they're increasingly becoming disconnected from the culture. So that does present some challenges, doesn't it? And I was a bit surprised and a bit embarrassed to see on that chart of all the different countries that the UK has had the worst experience of working in the pandemic. Not something to be proud of. I'd like to know more about why that was and what we would need to do differently and why it's been so great in the Philippines and so terrible here. Tell us more. Come back and talk about this again. Those three options we need to think about, that we're going to have our current space, we're going to have the same footprint but use it differently to create a better experience, or we're going to have less space and create a better experience. They're pretty much your three options, aren't they? So which one are you going for and how are you going to do it? We can use this period to iterate towards that new hybrid working, and we're going to see the flight to quality in office space. If you're going to pull out of some of your space, you're going to pull out of the worst space that you have, the space that's least suitable. So if everyone's doing that, and then everyone's pulled out of all of these retail spaces as well, what does that mean for real estate? That would be a good topic to discuss another time as well, wouldn't it? We had Dan Guest, CEO of Technical Services from Mighty, with a case study talking about what they've been doing in Mighty. And of course, Mighty were in the news about this because Phil Bentley basically told everybody last year, didn't he, to get back in the office and follow the government guidelines. And so they've had to be in the vanguard of that because they're delivering this for everybody else. So how is that working for them, and what have they done as an organization? It's a good question, isn't it? What do you think your organization has done all it can for colleagues? A couple of key things coming out of there: Mind having declared a mental health emergency, and that digital divide with 22% of people in the UK still not having basic digital skills or equipment. We had another case study after that. Simon Sharp from HMRC and Pam and David from Italian Savest talking about their contract that was mobilizing during the pandemic. Like lots of the buildings we were discussing, there's a legacy estate in HMRC, so it is going to face a lot of the challenges we talked about in terms of things like air circulation, quality of space, quality of the real estate overall. Lots of practical examples we looked at there in this contract, which is a long-term view. And wasn't it interesting that right up at the end was about the first mention actually of affordability, because we've talked a lot about what we're going to do and we haven't really talked about cost and value, which is something that often we do talk about in these conferences in relation to FM. And we've been worried about that kind of race to the bottom, the way we are seen as a cost rather than a value add. And hopefully that's something that's going to change. So what didn't we talk about today that perhaps we might have done? We didn't talk really about how these flexible, people-driven new arrangements might be reflected in FM contracts. It's interesting that the industry said we need more flexible, more dynamic, easier to operate contracts. And one of our professional institutes said, OK, we'll just update the NEC3 and make the NEC4. Yes, you can make changes in that contract, but wow, there are hoops that you've got to jump through to do that. Is that what we really need as FMs? That's a new contract. It's only just come out. There's no competition for it at the moment, but I think we're facing an open goal there. We didn't talk about the third spaces, co-working spaces, shared workspaces. When we had our pre-pandemic Workplace Futures conference in 2020, we were talking quite a lot there about the WeWorks and what was going to happen there. Haven't even mentioned WeWork today. I've started working in a co-working space near to where I live. That's a new model that is going to be added into the mix when we're talking about hybrid working. And we didn't really say very much about the world beyond the office, all of those people that don't work in offices, because there are lots of other workplaces coming back on stream that are not offices. And I was thinking about things like theatres, nightclubs and leisure, airports and planes, hotels. And we perhaps haven't covered those as thoroughly as we might have done. And we do tend to draw a lot of information around the office environment, but we do need to recognise all of those people that work in FM and all of those people that work in workplaces that are not an office. So what's coming up on the horizon? The RICS are going to be launching their International Building Operating Standard. So that's going to be another way you can tell how to look after your building. That's a standard that people will be operating towards. You've got the WELL accreditation. You've got to think about how to blend all of these things together to create that hybrid workspace. What's going to happen to things like business travel, to conferences, to social events related to work? So something like this conference, you might have come to that when we were in London, but I tended to go to social and networking events if I was in London for other meetings. So if people are only going to be in the workplace a couple of days a week, does that mean that they're less likely to attend in-person events after work because they're not going to travel in from home if they're not even going to travel in for work? I can expect to see a lot of changes coming in around social value, things like ISO 2400, the social value standard in procurement, ISO 11,000 in collaboration. But I think that the big challenge that we need to be thinking about in FM, once we've cracked what we mean by hybrid working, is how do our service delivery arrangements also map against that? Because we talked a great deal about how we would focus on the people and creating their experience and giving them that flexibility to bounce in and out, have lots of different spaces, come at different times, come on different days. FM contracts really don't map against that pattern of working. And so we really need to think about how we can reflect the people requirements in the contractual requirements and have something equally flexible and movable and fluid in the service delivery arrangements that we make. Our next conference is in February, I believe. I'm not exactly sure what we're going to be talking about, but I know it's going to be focusing on some of those things because they remain the hot topics. We have networking after this. We have questions and answers. We have chit chat, and I'm sure Martin will explain that better than I have, but do stay on, tell us what you thought, tell us what you want to see next time, ask us some questions, have a virtual beer with us in I think, Martin, are you having your virtual pub again?
Absolutely.
Oh, okay, come to the pub with Martin then, drinks on him.
Thank you, Lucy. I mean, it just shows how much we've covered today. What an incredible array of things we've gone through. The Lucy, fantastic as she is, was the only speaker today to run her time slot. But there you go. We'll forgive her.
Can't fit it in otherwise.
I'm just going to say, the quick thank yous. Thank you very much, obviously, to Lucy, to Elliot Chase, who put the program together, to David Emmanuel as the genius behind all of this, Dave Hurrell as the tech genius, and Ian Newman as the guy who's been paddling like the feet of a duck in the background all day long, making sure that this has gone as well as it has. Thank you to the team at Hopin for creating this platform, which I think works really, really well. Thank you to whoever made you lunch. Thank you to those who have donated and those of you who are going to do it in a minute. Thank you to the sponsors, to all of the speakers, and of course, chiefly yourselves. As Lucy says, we've got 4 networking rooms. If you go to the sessions tab, there are 4 there to choose from. 3 of them you can go in and do formal business networking and meet people, talk about the day, and be very serious. If, on the other hand, you just want to raise a beer and sit back and have a bit of a chat, there's Martin's Corner at the bar, and I'll be there ready for you. Thank you all very much indeed, and good night.